everybody? This is Pastor St. Thomas with another transmission. Today we're going to be in the Gospel of Mark. We're going to be in chapter 10. We're going to be in verses 35 through 52. But first I want to show you guys a video on this lady that is an atheist.
Was there an exodus from Egypt? No, there wasn't an exodus. So once you start doing that, then you have to start doubting the credibility of all the other claims that the Bible makes. And that's why people get annoyed, because for some reason, people like to think that the Bible's true.
And the answer is, and this is Mount Sinai.
It's quite amazing. It's called the Brooklyn Papyrus. And this actually is a list of domestic servants from one estate.
We have maybe up to 100 people listed as slaves in Egypt. When we look at those names, 70% of them are Semitic names. And you can literally pick up Israelite names in there. Menachem, Issachar, and Asher, the names of two other tribes of Israel. Shiphrah, one of the Hebrew midwives in the Exodus story, a name that appears in this document.
Amenhotep could have been the throne name of Prince Thutmose, who was allegedly Akhenaten's brother and was supposed to rule before or after Akhenaten, but never got to.
There are numerous theories regarding Akhenaten's mysterious brother, Thutmose. But the most profound comes from an unexpected source, Sigmund Freud, who in addition to being the founder of psychoanalysis, was also a scholar of Judaism and ancient Egypt.
Sigmund Freud, the famous psychoanalyst, in 1939 first suggested that monotheism began with Akhenaten. And he thought that someone in Akhenaten's court, perhaps his brother Thutmosis, could in fact be the historical Moses.
According to Freud, the events depicted in the Bible surrounding Moses' birth, exile, and most importantly his introduction of monotheism perfectly coincide with the historical record of
In that video, she says there's no evidence for the Exodus, and then we saw all kinds of evidence for the Exodus. That lady is quoting a document that's called the High Criticism, and it was designed in the 1800s to discredit the Bible. And unfortunately, the High Criticism has been inserted in certain translations as a commentary for the Bible. It's unfortunate. But the thing about the High Criticism is that it eventually lost its valor with the advent of archaeology. For example, in that very same interview, but in another part, she said that there were no camels in Egypt at the time of Abraham. And the thing about archaeology is that they eventually found camels in and around the Middle East that date to the time before Abraham. We're talking about by hundreds of years. Camel remains and quarters of camels. So again, you know, the High Criticism, it was designed to destroy the Bible. But you know, the only thing I can say to the High Criticism is better luck next time, because you lost. But we're going to continue in the Gospel of Mark. And here is Mark.
And James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came unto him, saying, Master, we would that thou shouldest do for us whatsoever we shall desire. And he said unto them, What would ye that I should do for you? They said unto him, Grant unto us, that we may sit one on thy right hand, and the other on thy left in thy glory. But Jesus said unto them, Ye know not what ye ask. Can ye drink of the cup that I drink of, and be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with? And they said unto him, We can. And Jesus said unto them, Ye shall indeed drink of the cup that I drink of, and with the baptism that I am baptized withal shall ye be baptized. But to sit on my right hand and on my left hand is not mine to give, but it shall be given to them for whom it is prepared. And when the 10 heard it, they began to be much displeased with James and John. But Jesus called them to him, and saith unto them, Ye know that they which are accounted to rule over the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and their great ones exercise authority upon them. But so shall it not be among you. But whosoever will be great among you shall be your minister. And whosoever of you will be the chiefest shall be servant of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be ministered unto, but to minister, and to give his life a ransom for many. And they came to Jericho, and as he went out of Jericho with his disciples and a great number of people, blind Bartimaeus, the son of Timaeus, sat by the highway side begging. And when he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to cry out and say, Jesus, thou son of David, have mercy on me. And many charged him that he should hold his peace. But he cried the more a great deal, Thou son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus stood still, and commanded him to be called. And they called the blind man, saying unto him, Be of good comfort, rise, he calleth thee. And he, casting away his garments, rose and came to Jesus. And Jesus answered and said unto him, What wilt thou that I should do unto thee? The blind man said unto him, Lord, that I might receive my sight. And Jesus said unto him, Go thy way, thy faith hath made thee whole.
And that was Mark chapter 10, verse 35 through 45. And we see two things. We see that James and John asked Jesus to be on his right and his left in his kingdom, in the Messianic kingdom. Now, according to Josephus, the Roman historian from the first century, said that those were the two highest positions in a royal court. So basically, these guys, they wanted to be second in command. Now, if you remember, both James, John, and Peter were eyewitnesses of Jesus' transfiguration, and where he shone, when his face shined like the sun. And I'm assuming these guys were thinking, man, this is awesome. And if you remember in the previous chapter, in Mark chapter 9, verse 33 through 37, they were arguing among themselves who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom. And Jesus kind of set the tone. He basically replaced the ambition to rule with the ambition to serve. And he talked about becoming like little children in order to enter the kingdom. But apparently this time, it looks like James and John were like, hey, let's get it. If this is going to be a cool kingdom, we want to be second in command, so to speak. So Jesus, he basically tells them that are they worthy to undergo the baptism or the cup. And the concept of the cup is from Isaiah 51, verses 17 through 23, where it's the cup of wrath. And he mentioned baptism, which simply means to be submerged into a situation. His baptism, meaning his death. And they said, yes, they are willing to go through this. And here's the thing. James was the first of them to die, of the apostles. He was actually beheaded by Herod, and you can read about that in Acts chapter 12, verses 1 through 2. And then later on, John would suffer martyrdom, the apostle John. But he was, during a wave of persecution, they dumped him into a pot of boiling oil. And by some miracle, he survived. But he did suffer martyrdom for the faith, and he was the only one to die a peaceful death. And he died in the year 100 AD, and around 90 AD he composed the Gospel of John and also the Book of Revelations. But from what it looks like, the other 10 were kind of indignant with these two. And so Jesus kind of sets the tone for them again. Like he says in Mark chapter 10, verse 44, so whoever of you will be the chiefest shall be servant of all. In other words, if you want to be first, you gotta serve everybody. Now, in the previous chapter, in Mark chapter 9, verse 35, Jesus, it said he sat down, called the 12, sent unto them, any man desire to be first, the same shall be the last of all and servant of all. And now in chapter 9, servant is diakonos, and it means a willingness to serve. Like it has to come from within, and you go out and you serve everybody. But in Mark chapter 10 verse 44, he uses a different word in the Greek, and it's doulos, and it means slave to all. Like Jesus is basically amping it up. You know, like if they didn't get it the first time, he's like, okay, let me amp it up. You're not just gonna, it's not just you're gonna want to serve. It's you're gonna basically a slave to all, so to speak. And Jesus uses himself, like his own life example, as a model to follow, because he came and died for us all. Like Isaiah 53, he came and died. Look what it says in Philippians chapter 2, verses 6 through 7. It says, speaking of Jesus, to whom though himself in the form of God, it did not seem that to take for oneself was to be like God, but made himself of no reputation, and took up upon him the form of a slave, and was made in the likeness of men. And Jesus would ransom his life for ours. Now, when it says that, when Jesus said that, he came to give his life as a ransom, that whole concept of a ransom is a Greek word that basically means, it's almost like when you purchase a slave at the market. Like he's basically giving his life as a sacrificial, as a sacrifice to atone for our sins, so to speak. So he came to do that. That was his mission and his job. Like the punishment that should be upon us went on him. And look what it says here in Romans chapter 6, verse 22. But now being made free from sin and become servants to God, ye have your fruit unto holiness, and the end everlasting life. Like it's basically saying that because we are slaves to sin, Jesus paid that slave price for our sins. Like he died for us on the cross so that we could be free, and now we could be free to honor and serve God every day for the rest of our lives. And if you look at the great leaders of the past, it's usually been the ones that served their people the best. I could think of a quote from John F. Kennedy who said, "Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country." I remember of another quote, and this is funny because it's a cartoon character, but Superman. I have to quote Superman because what he said was so true. He was talking to a queen, and he said, as leaders, your job is to serve the people, not the other way around. And you know what? It is so true. As those of us that are leaders, or who want to be leaders in God's kingdom, or in politics, or wherever, our job is to serve people. But even all of us as basic Christians, our job is to serve people, to love people, to bring people into a right relationship with God. And afterwards it says that Jesus healed Bartimaeus of his blindness. Like he performed that miracle. But let's think of the spiritual blindness that's in the world right now. There's a lot of spiritual. In fact, the spiritual blindness is so bad. That's why we have a thing called corruption. That's why you have people in power, positions of power and of influence that are hoarding up, stealing all the money for themselves. And the people are suffering. Why? Because of spiritual blindness. Because these people are not right with God. They are not right with Jesus. That's why there's a lot of suffering in this world. You know, if all the people on the planet, from the least of us to the greatest, if all of us were to engage into a right relationship with God, much of the suffering and many, many of the problems would come to an end. You'd be shocked. But anyway, we're going to stop right here, and we will continue in these transmissions of the Gospel of Mark. Blessings to all.